I'm Judd Myers.
I'm Scott Tipton.
Welcome to Blast Off.
And welcome to the Blast Off podcast. Time for another one of our conversation shows. It's been interesting in the years that you and I have had the shop, Judd, in that I've gotten to know customers by what they buy. Again, something that I'd never considered. You know, you get to know them when they have conversations with them, but you also get to know their tastes. And Quinton Peeples is a guy whose tastes almost precisely coincide with my own.
That's true.
I mean, I'll look at the stuff in the back, and if I see two of something, well, I know that one's for me. And if there's one for me, there's probably one for Quinton there, too. Whether it's that classic Kirby, Batman 1966, a classic Marvel. If it was an EKG, the beat would go up and down in the exact same places.
That's really true. And when I'm doing the ordering, that's exactly what happens. QPST. That's how it is.
And there's been a few times where we've ordered something for me and I didn't get it. And I know Quinton's got it. And you guys are just not telling me. I got to reorder somebody's and it's not going to be Quinton's.
It is very true. You're a vocal historian with your writing and now with your podcast. He's something of a historian too, but he keeps it all to himself. Occasionally he'll let it out, but he has just a wide breadth of knowledge. And of course, he's been working on so many really, really important things for the comic book industry lately, but he's been around a long time and he is a true creative. I mean, writing, producing, directing, you know, he doesn't sit around. He's always working. Just a real, authentic man. Very, very fascinating, and also has a few hidden talents that we dig into in our conversation.
And speaking just purely selfishly, in the last year or two, when I've heard about the projects that he's been working on, you want your friends to do well, and that's one thing. And you know, it's always good to see your friends succeed. But on a personal level, he's on Iron Fist. Oh, that's going to be good. He worked on the Stephen King adaptation for 11/22/63. That's fantastic. When you know that talented people are working on projects that you love, that's money in the bank.
Yeah, and of course, I know these things are coming because he comes into the store and says, "So, old Iron Fist comics, what do you have in stock?" And I'm going, "Oh, well, yeah." So anyway, this is going to be a really fantastic conversation with a very highly intellectual and authentic human being. Our guest today is Quinton Peeples. He's been writing, producing, and directing for film and television for over 30 years and has a lot to offer us. You might recognize him from his TV work on Flash Forward, great show, The Last Ship, and Unforgettable, or his extremely well-received inspirational film Woodlawn. This year he acted as the writer and executive producer on Hulu's 11/22/63, the adaptation of Stephen King's best-selling novel. It was pretty wonderful. And next year, well, he's making the same magic happen with Iron Fist, Marvel's next big superhero comic book television extravaganza. Hope you enjoy this episode. I did. He's a pretty amazing guy. What was the first comic book that you ever remember reading that stayed with you?
Oh, that's an easy one. That was, I guess it was, I'm not sure the number. It's maybe Batman 168 or 164. I think it's 168. That was Batman sitting in front of the television and Robin coming in to say, "Oh, we got something to do." And Batman's like, "I got to watch my stuff on television."
Yeah, he's got his feet kicked up.
Exactly.
And
And so that was all based on the television show. As a kid, I was obsessed with the show and did not know how to read. And then when I found out that those stories were in books, in comic books, that was the beginning. I needed to basically learn how to read to get more of what I was experiencing on television. And then that cover was basically, those were the guys I was watching on TV. So that was how it all started.
So this was in Texas, right?
Yes, I grew up in Abilene, Texas. And obviously that was 1966, right at the height of the whole Adam West Batman thing. As an early reader, or a kid would, you start just going through with the pictures, and then you bug your parents to help you with it. And then I was just set up with that kind of personality where I was like, I really have to master reading so that I can unlock this whole thing. And then the idea that there were new stories that were coming out every month was like, oh, you got to be kidding me. And then... Did
your dad get you the comic? Was it?
I think, yeah, it was probably my father, my mother. I mean, there was a pharmacy. This is a very small town. There was a pharmacy relatively close to our house where all the comics were out on a shelf or on a rack. And she may have, I mean, obviously she knew I was obsessed with a television show. And there's a funny story for Halloween. Obviously, that's who I wanted to be. And so they got me, and I still need to track it down. I've seen it around in places, but there was a Halloween costume you could buy that was like a molded plastic helmet that was Batman's cowl. And they got me that, and there was a little cape stitched to the back. But the headpiece was like a helmet that you wore, and I wouldn't take it off. I wore it 24 hours a day. I slept in it. And they allowed that for about 2 weeks, and then one day I took it off, and I had this terrible rash, like from the cowl.
It was like a sunburn.
It was horrible. And they were like, you have to stop wearing that mask 24 hours a day. But that's how deep I was into it. So they were encouraging, I think, in getting things started. And then I became that kid who would take his allowance down to that pharmacy and spend every dime I had gathering up all the comics that interested me as a kid, which was almost everything. And then I had a very strange relationship with the pharmacist who again, a little insight into my obsessive personality. I would consistently go to the counter and say, have they come in yet? Have the new ones come in yet? And he'd be like, kid, I tell you every week I put the new ones out on Friday. And nevertheless, I would always go on Tuesday and say, well, were there some you left in the back that you haven't put out? Are you sure they're all out there? Because I'd gone through everything. I'd gotten everything I wanted, but I was certain there was probably one or two that I had missed. And literally I drove him crazy. But there was, that was really the beginning for me, and it truly never went away. So I look back, and as you know, I have great fondness for the Silver Age and up into the Bronze Age, because that was really a particular period where those universes and the imagination that were in those books occupied me and hooked me, and I was completely involved in that.
Did you have siblings? Was it just
Yes,
you?
I had a younger sister. I still have a younger sister. And, my parents were very encouraging of it. And obviously as a kid, I could have gotten into things that were much, much worse. So, having a kid who was interested in reading and who was involved in this imaginary universe. And that really grew into, I tell this story all the time too. I wanted to be Jack Kirby when I grew up. Like, I thought that was the place to be. Like, Jack was it for me. And so
it wasn't Stan, it was Jack.
No, absolutely.
Okay.
I knew exactly what I was interested in. And I knew that there was a unique voice there that I was now tracking across both the DC universe and the Marvel universe, that it wasn't unique to the brand, it was the guy. And so I started to draw, and I drew endlessly. And I thought for a long, long time, until I was in my 20s, I was pretty sure that I was going to be an artist, that I was going to be an illustrator, and went to art school for that. And that started to, art school started to shake up some other things in me. But it was really, I came in through Jack Kirby, and I really thought, oh, there's a person who goes out and out of nothing creates an entire functioning universe. And that sounds cool to me. Like, the words and the pictures, it's a completely functioning thing. And that sounds like a great business to be in. And so that's kind of how I came in.
But you left art behind. Do you still draw?
Not really. I still have those skills. I don't do it regularly, but I can if pressed. And what was interesting, the transition really was I got to art school. I'd been in art school for 2 years, and part of regular art school curriculum is peer reviews where you're putting your work up and everybody in your class is making comments on it. And I'd kind of transitioned a little bit into photography, but I was having the regular art school experience. And I had that great teacher moment where after a particularly contentious peer review, teacher pulls me aside and goes, "The reason you're so angry here is because you're trying to tell a narrative story and art does not tell a narrative story." And that was literally the Looney Tunes anvil falling out of the sky and whacking me on the head.
She told you should be a writer.
Yeah. And I was in Los Angeles 6 months later. Clarity was like, bang, that is so right on. And it didn't take me very long to kind of discern that narrative storytelling was what I wanted to do, that movies and TV was probably the best place to do that. And I came here and said, well, I'm going to film school then. I'm going to do my graduate work in film school.
That was your early 20s.
That was, I was 22 years old. That was 1984.
And you knew no one here in LA?
Nobody. I was telling the story to my wife just last night. I moved to Los Angeles. I had 4 or 5 boxes of stuff in the back of a Mitsubishi pickup truck. I didn't know anybody. I didn't have a job. I had no prospects. I had no place to live. And so if you came to me now and told me that one of my kids, that was their plan, I would say, no way. That is an awful strategy. But it worked out for me. And I was pretty driven and was really willing to kind of do whatever it takes. And
so you had to get odd jobs?
My first job moving to Los Angeles was working in the gift store at the Museum of Science and Industry. I had a retail job at the Museum of Science and Industry, basically selling silly string and stuff like that to school kids who came through on tours. And that was the best I could do at the time. I had a portfolio that I had put together, an illustration and a graphic design portfolio that I put together at art school that I started to carry around to advertising agencies and design firms and stuff like that. It took me about 6 months to get out of that gift shop job and into a design job, actually down in Santa Monica for a company that did industrial films and kind of marketing and promotional material for banks and financial institutions. It's super boring, but it paid really well, and the people were lovely. And that gave me an opportunity to start to then fill out applications for film school and look at what going to film school would actually be like and what it would cost. And so that was a great kind of interim while I got my film school thing together.
Did you pay for your education?
Yes.
You paid for your own education?
Yeah. I got into USC, which was like, woohoo, here's the acceptance letter from USC. And like a young person, I hadn't actually done all the homework to figure out like what it would actually cost. So that was heartbreaking. Like, oh, you got in, but there's no way on earth you can pay for it. And then my second choice, which was where I went and was absolutely the best place for me, was the AFI. And I could afford that. And that was really not knocking Texas education or whatever, but that was the first blue ribbon education I'd ever had. Like, if you're at a top 5 film school, you're working with the best of the best. And that was the first time where I felt like, oh, wow, like I'm in a classroom with students who are the best of the best, and I'm being taught by instructors who are the best of the best, and like full on, pay attention to what's happening here. This is big. And it was for me. I have nothing but praise for the AFI in that program. So it was a huge turning point at the beginning of my career.
From when you were a kid, were there other friends who read comics? Were they?
There were,
Were you an outcast? Were you?
No, I'm an outcast. I mean, I was always for a long time felt like that cartoon. I think it's a Looney Tunes cartoon where the stork gets confused and drops the babies in the wrong spot. Like, yeah. I thought that had really happened to me, meaning that my family was tolerant but kind of confused about me because I just didn't have the same interests that my parents had. My parents had always been small town Texas people, country people. And here was this kid who was reading comics and bringing home Mozart records from the public library and reading books about the Crusades. Like I was just I didn't fit. My interests weren't the same, but I was tolerated. I wasn't really seen as a threat or whatever. Like, I encountered some bullying as a kid and as a young adult, but not for that reason. So I was just like that anomaly that people were like, yeah. And I give some credit or some whatever you want to call to the fact that in the South, eccentrics are part of the landscape. Mm-hmm. Everybody's got one. And I was that. I was the Southern eccentric, and people, I think if I had stayed in town, I would have just been that one weird dude that was allowed. And that's kind of how I was. Now, I had a couple of childhood friends who were comic book fans in the same way that I was. There were the three of us. And I mean, we were really those pals who would go way down that rabbit hole of, well, how can there actually be two Earths and blah. And I mean, those endless conversations. And we each had different artists or writers or characters that we were passionate about. And that was really where you're trading books back and forth. Maybe things they didn't like that you liked that they picked up. And they had inherited books from older brothers or sisters. I mean, obviously this is in the universe before there's comic book stores where you can go and dig up back issues. So being able to tap into older issues that you didn't have access to because somebody's older brother had bequeathed them or somebody's cousin had given them books that you didn't know those books existed. Mm-hmm. Because I almost immediately, because of some reprint books, the Marvel fantasy masterpieces and stuff like that, I was like, holy cow, you mean like Captain America and the Submariner and Human Torch knew each other before 1964? And so being able to get to those books through other people were absolutely, that was like, how many more universes are there out there that I don't know anything about? How long has this been going on? You know, like as a kid, you didn't have any idea of where comics started or how long they'd been cooking. The idea of a Silver Age or a Golden Age, or you didn't know. And I remember getting a very early copy of The Worldwide History of Comics. It was a huge book, hardback book that my grandmother, I'm not quite sure who, dug it up for me for Christmas. And that's the place I can remember opening that book and realizing that other people in other countries had comics, that comics had existed before 1964, that people had been doing this for a long time, that there was actually a history out there that I knew nothing about. And that was, again, this is all pre-internet, and the library, certainly the Abilene, Texas library, was not carrying any history of comics at all. So you had to kind of dig around and put it together for yourself. And that's where trading comics really came into. Very early on, I was interested in Dick Sprang as an artist and had only seen little pieces of his work and wanted to go like, I like the smiling Batman. I want to go find that guy. And the only way to it was through brothers and sisters and cousins and inherited books. And so that's where that kind of having friends and trading comics was super important. And I still live that way. You know, people are always opening up things. We go back and forth. I mean, Polar is a good example. I never would have gotten to Polar without you. And that's community. that's why comics community is so great, and being involved with people who have interests that are different than yours. That's been baked into me from the beginning.
Yeah, I just interviewed Cecil Castellucci, and she was talking about tribe. She uses that word a lot, and how you establish a tribe and then you move away and then you establish a new tribe, but you still have connections to your old one.
Yes.
And you're a new person now. A new person requires a new tribe.
Yeah.
But without it, you're lost. You still connect with those friends? Are they long gone?
Oh, no, my goodness. I mean, again, you can knock Facebook for so many things, but one of the things that Facebook has done and done well is keep me in touch with those guys that I was friends with. I see them virtually or regularly on Facebook, and it's just a wonderful, like you said, it's a shared history, and they're excited about what I'm doing now. And
they wouldn't be surprised. Like,
no.
Are they go, okay, that makes sense. What you are now.
Yes. And very much vicarious, being able for us to share. Oh, remember when we were in the garage and 10 years old, we never imagined that this universe would come to be. Like the idea that on television is the golden age Flash right next to the modern age Flash, and that one of us is actually in that universe making a living. That's a dream come true for the whole group of people that were in there with me all along. And we're like, yeah, no, I knew that was you, man. You were crazy for that stuff. And that part is fun.
And when you came out here to Los Angeles, there you are, you're in film school, or even before film school. Okay, comic books. Mm-hmm. Now, I know for me, I've owned stores for 15 years, but I go to a new place.
Yeah.
I go on vacation. I find myself in another city. I look to see what comic book store is around, what's close by, or a used bookstore, or whatever it is, because that's what we do.
Right.
We hunt for it.
Mm-hmm.
Did you do that when you
absolutely.
Here?
I mean, when I got here, didn't take much hunting around. I mean, I lived in Hollywood on Martel, Sunset and Martel, just in a kind of a boarding house, Sunset and Martel, and all the record stores were down on, all the used record stores were down on Melrose. So if you were going to errands, you were within a stone's throw of Golden Apple. And so for me, as a kid or a person in their 20s who had basically been buying comics off the rack or out of 7-Elevens or pharmacies, to walk into Golden Apple was like, oh my God, I did not know places like this existed. Like I just couldn't believe all of that stuff was there. And again, okay, maybe I had a couple of Batman t-shirts that were, the iron-on transfers on a white Hanes t-shirt that you got at the mall. So to walk in and see professionally made shirts, all the merchandise that I'd never, ever seen before. And there was great, as obviously there was great energy at that moment because you're stepping into Frank Miller and The Dark Knight. Mm-hmm. That was the mid-'80s. The Watchmen was exploding. Love and Rockets, which being in Los Angeles when the Hernandez brothers are actually making that work. Raw, which was a huge thing for me. That was a reinvigoration of creativity around comics at exactly the right moment where I stepped into Golden Apple at the second that was happening. And so now it was just like fireworks all over the place. And it was just fantastic.
Isn't that funny, the parallels we have? Because that for me was my store as well.
Yeah.
And the first job I ever had was in Golden Apple. And stumbling into that job and it being such an oasis for me.
Yeah. Which
was even more extraordinary when I bought it.
Yeah, exactly.
And that, and having my daughter there and having described to her all of the stories.
Yes.
It's interesting that here you come to Los Angeles. Back then, that was really that was the flagship. There was really nowhere else to go.
That wasn't super creepy.
Yeah.
And that's the thing we talk about all the time. Like you walk into these places that the carpet smells like somebody's terrible basement. And, and you go, yeah, I could come here, but I don't want to. And so Golden Apple is really that place where comic book retailing takes a turn and goes, no, this is actually a place you would want to come and you could not feel embarrassed, and it doesn't feel like a dungeon, and it feels like culture is happening here, as opposed to it's a creepy like place where that's just the difference. And
having said that, I remember a little hole in the wall called the Bookie Joint, and it was a secondhand bookstore, and it was all the things that, you say. There was sawdust on the floor and all that. But they had boxes in the back, and they just threw comics in there. Somebody came in and sold something, or they just had, we want to sell these used books, and at the bottom of the box there were comics. They just toss them in these boxes. So I made my visits.
Yes.
I'm just going to go check in the back to see never knew what kind of gem was going to be hidden in there.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a place down in Santa Monica that was on Lincoln Boulevard. I can't even remember what the name of it was now. It would not pass a fire code currently. But it was one of those places, and you never see them now, where they would take newspapers and magazines, and it was organized in exactly the way that you say, which is the back of the place were just these big cardboard boxes. And if you were looking for research material, and at the time I was down there working at that first job doing graphic design. And so if you were looking for spaceship designs, or you were looking for something else, and you needed Scientific American, you had to go to that place and dig through the Scientific American box looking for whatever it was that you needed. And obviously the internet has killed all of that now, but that was the crate digging, long box digging part of me has definitely come from that whole experience.
And yet, there you are reading comic books, taking in all of that crazy mythology and morality tales. And in school, that's not what you're writing. You're writing relationship stories, family, and sort of maybe a little bit darker. Was it just you finding your voice? Were you just...
Yeah, I think that I tell this story to students and so forth all the time, meaning I was really blessed in the sense that I came from Southern culture where storytelling is actually currency, meaning that the ability to tell a story and tell a story well is valuable. Because that's what everybody's doing. Whether you're at the counter at the truck stop or you're on somebody's front porch on a Sunday afternoon, I did not grow up in a place that was overrun by media, meaning television. When I was a kid, there were only 2 stations. You could only get 2 channels because there wasn't even a CBS, because there was nobody around to buy the third. Nobody had enough money to pay for the third tower and all that stuff. So that meant there was still daytimes and Sunday evenings, and there weren't 1,000 things to choose from. So people were sitting around going, oh, did you hear about, Joey lost a cow in a ditch last week? Let me tell you what happened. That was everywhere. And in order to participate in that culture, you needed to be able to tell a story and tell a story well. And I tell people all this time, the truth had nothing to do with it. Right?
Well, because you run out of stories and you just look for stuff.
And you're just trying to fill time.
Yeah.
So you need to take a sliver of the truth and build out 15 minutes. And so you learn that by osmosis. So that world building that is necessary in all writing was baked into me from the beginning. And certainly then coming to Jack Kirby or any of these other people who I was attracted to through comics were then the extra boost of you need to really think differently. You need to be much more imaginative. Then I got to, maybe I can make a living at this. Then you're looking at a different landscape and you're going, how do people make a living at this? Well, at the moment, they make a living at this through cop shows, buddy comedies. I mean, you look at the kind of storytelling that you need to adapt to, but you take the same DNA into that, meaning, I see everybody does this the same way. How could it, I say it all the time, what would Jack Kirby do? So Jack would take what everybody else is doing
and then make a T-shirt of that. What would Kirby do?
Yes, exactly. And then go, I'm going to do the craziest version of what everybody else is doing, and then roll it back a little bit to where it's acceptable. And that's been my recipe going forward. So whether I was doing a family drama or whether I'm doing whatever the landscape happens to be, I see what the givens are, I see what people are doing, and then I go, what's the craziest version of that? Start there, and then roll it back into a spot where people can accept it and go, oh, I see what you're doing. It's kind of like that, but it's a little further out there. So this is a good example that you use. You're in film school, and at that particular time, there were a lot of, this was a little bit of the John Hughes era. Mm-hmm. So you had a lot of 16 Candles. You had a lot of kids that were knocking that stuff off. You had a lot of things where people were like, it's just like this, only a little different. And I came into it going, well, let's do something that looks like a family drama, looks like maybe a family drama thing here. But instead of going the John Hughes way, let's go the Stephen King way, which also a huge influence on me. And just moving slightly into genre there when everybody else was doing kind of straight down the middle, that way to think, that way of, and honing that skill of going, yeah, but what if it was really weird, has made all the difference for me. And that movie, I wrote in films, you have to write 2 features in order to get your MFA to finish out at the AFI. And that was one of the ones that I wrote. It ended up being called An Ambush of Ghosts, and went to Sundance. And it was basically taken from a true story. It was family drama taken from a true story of my growing up, with just enough Stephen King kicked into it to where people went, whoa, what is this? And that got me started, and it was all the difference.
Looking at your history, it's very fascinating to me that you, looking at the year that you graduated, that you got out, and then the year that you're not just writing, directing a feature film, really not a lot of time had passed. You hit the ground running.
I did. All credit there to the AFI, and it was a fantastic program. And one of the things that they pushed then, and I think they still do, is you're at the AFI to make mistakes. This is the last opportunity you will get to. So you should really, really take the big swings. You should really be, if you're not, I use this phrase all the time that I got from them, if you're not scaring yourself, you're not working hard enough. And so that 2-year period where I'm working with very sophisticated teachers in a fully funded, like everybody's rooting for you, you're out there really, I took advantage of, what's the scariest thing I can make? How can I really go out on a limb? How can I really make myself vulnerable? How can I really talk about the things that are important to me? Because when I get out into the marketplace, I'm going to have to adhere to the market rules that's just how it is. You have to make a living, hopefully. I mean, I wasn't gifted enough to be like some Quentin Tarantino or some auteur kind of touched by grace. I was just a working guy. So those 2 years, the AFI, I was really, 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 really working on my voice as a writer. What makes me me? What is it that people are responding to in my work? And those 2 samples that I had leaving school, because of that honing and that dedication and their strategy, they were really solid samples. They were professional pieces of work. And people really recognized it. I won an award, 2 awards when I was in my second year finishing my MFA. One was I was a finalist for the Nichols Fellowship, which is a screenwriting, still going, a big screenwriting contest thing. And then I won from the AFI a thing called the Richard Levinson Award for screenwriting. And those 2 things, in addition to the samples, got me a lot of attention right out of school. I started meeting with agents and managers almost immediately. And that was the big difference.
In that way, it's sort of different now than what used to be. You go to a specialty school or you go to university, and then they have job fairs and they have people who headhunt you before you're out. But now there's so many people, so much competition. There's so much white noise.
Yes.
There are a lot of students who are kicked out into the world, and then they don't have representation. They don't have, they're just out there pounding the pavement like everyone else.
Yeah.
But it seems back then people were looking for talent, and the pool was different than it is now.
Yes, the pool is different, although the machinations of it are still the same, meaning that when you're beginning, money legitimizes you. And so what I mean by that is when somebody spends some money on you, then everybody else goes, well, if Judd paid him $20, I ought to be able to pay him $20. And that first step into that is winning awards, getting some kind of legitimacy where some organization that's recognized says, yes, out of that huge pool of people, he's for real. Now, that still exists. It's, as you said, it's full of white noise because now it's complicated by Joe Tex's screenwriting competition winner. And you're like, well, who is Joe Tex's? Like, you don't understand. So what I tell people in the beginning is being able to get recognition from any legitimate organization that you were the winner of their screenwriting prize or their filmmaking prize is really where you need to start. Because people need to whether it's, Sundance has always been there, but that's the traditional one. Like if you go to the Sundance Writers, if you get picked for the Sundance Writers Conference, then you're legitimate. Mm-hmm. Or, you win some award. But it worked that way for me. Back in the day, what happened was if you were a Nichols Fellowship finalist, they wrote an article about you in the Hollywood Reporter and Variety. And the day that article hit, my telephone started to ring. And that's still, like you said, it's a little more complicated, but that still works in that way, meaning people who get legitimized by organizations or by money or by getting a job, that's how you get your foot in the door. And there's lots of different ways to do it. You can make your own films. It's harder for screenwriters, but for filmmakers, you can make your own films, enter short film contests or any of these kinds of things, and hope to get a foothold there so that your profile rises.
Do you think that the habits that you learned at school, that they followed you into the real world? Do you use those same, okay, I write in this way, and did you hold on to those?
Yes, there's no question about it. And, people, there's a lot of back and forth about whether film school is valuable or not. And I'm on the pro side because what they can give you, if they function well, is that tool set. They can give you the tools. They will, obviously, they're not giving you talent, but they're giving you some mechanical pieces that will help the talent come to pass. So for me, and I think for a lot of people, moving into an environment where you're surrounded by professionals who say you need to be religious around your work life. You need to take it seriously. It's an actual business. You need to run it like a business. And here is how that gets done. That's like me with comic books in the 60s. Like if I had not had somebody come to me and go, oh, there's a real way that this works. This doesn't just appear out of the ether. I wouldn't have been able to put it together. I needed somebody to say, hey, listen, your wife's not going to like it. Your kids aren't going to like it. You're going to lock yourself in that room. And for those hours that you need to work, that door stays closed and you don't talk to people. Like that's what it is. That's what you do. Everybody else, if you want this to work, has to revolve around that. That's non-negotiable.
Isn't it interesting that in any other field, any other industry, That is just a given. You go into your workshop and you go and work for 8 hours or 10 hours on the specific thing that you're supposed to build. And then you go home. And then you go the next day, you go back and work on it again. Mm-hmm. And that's what you do. Just like any job, you're working on a project that you're doing. And yet so many writers seem to fall into this sort of strange category of, sometimes, I'm working on this and sometimes I'm working on that. And they use the word industry all the time. I've heard it for years in my shop because we live in a steel town and steel is entertainment. Mm-hmm. So this industry is, you're constantly at work on something. It's just a strange thing that it's an idea.
Right. There's a thing I use all the time, and obviously I have to, I've been married for 23 years, and I've been with my wife for 26 years.
Did you meet her here?
Yeah. I worked at Video Store in Santa Monica.
This was before film school or during film school?
No, this is right kind of at the end of film school. And
so before you won all your awards.
Yes, exactly. So she's been for the whole ride. Yeah. I tell her all the time, I don't get paid to type. I get paid to stare out the window. And I know that's hard for you. Like, it's hard to come from the culture where everyone else is doing a thing. Like, you can watch them do their thing and go like, oh, he's working. And you look at me and I'm off wandering around the backyard and you go, that doesn't look like work to me. Mm-hmm. Like, that's actually an ongoing challenge inside every close relationship, that what I do doesn't look like work. It just doesn't look. It does when I'm typing, but that's the smallest part of what I do. Mm. The largest part of what I do is broadly stare out the window. And for the regular person, for the person who has to go to work and punch a time card and deal with their bosses and whatever, get the store open, stack the things, go to the mailbox. Me wandering around the neighborhood, staring off into the sky looks like BS. Like, I don't think that's work. Like, it's still ongoing. Like I said, it's 26 years and I think my wife is still like, man, I don't know, man.
Does she look at you and go, are you working now? Or are you just thinking about a grocery list?
And it is. So she'll come in, and when I'm working from home, she's very kind about it. But she'll come in and she'll be like, are you working right now? Or are you just kind of like, can I ask you a question about the grocery list? Or are
you on another time period? Have you traveled through time and you're there now?
And that's why it's really important. And again, this is one of the things from film school where the teachers were like, get a room where you can close the door so that people know if that door is closed, just don't bug them.
Did you do that with your kids? Did you say this is how it is, like the Peanuts? Yes. The doctor is in, the doctor is out.
Absolutely right. There's no other way to manage it. And it still didn't make any difference to them because you're there and it's like, you're like, oh my God. So that's why people ask me all the time, when you work on a television show, you get an office of your own, and people are different levels of their life. And lots of writers, when they're on script, like to go home and work. And I'm like, no way. I got an office, man. I'm as far away from somebody knocking on my door as I can get. I'm going to be here working. Mm-hmm. It's just easier on everybody because it's like you said. Then I leave the house at 8:30. I'm gone. I must be working. And then I come home and like daddy's home and he's not working.
Yeah.
That's just easier on everybody.
Well, there's kind of no excuse for a young writer because these days you can take your computer with you anywhere. You can go up to the Getty and sit there in quiet and at a table and write in this beautiful sunshine.
And I think that the question always becomes, and this is really where the rubber meets the road for writers, is self-discipline is essential. So, and again, lessons brought from film school. It's just going to be easier on you if you decide it can only be 15 minutes, it can be 2 hours. You set whatever the thing is. The self-discipline necessary to say 5 days a week from 8:30 to 9:30, I write. I sit in this chair. I do it like it must be, like I say to people, it must be a religious experience for you, meaning it's ritualized. I don't miss. I'm committed to it. Whether it's good or bad in that hour means nothing. I'm just going to show up like at the store. It's not like you don't go, Tuesday was kind of lame. I don't much feel like going on Wednesday, and I'll make it up on Thursday. But that's the way most writers think. Instead of going, no, I have to be there on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
With a shop, okay, my shop, 7 days a week, 363 days a year. We're closed for Thanksgiving and Christmas. That's it. We're open every other day. And yet, I never work on Sundays.
Right.
Sundays are for my family. That's how it's always been. So we're talking about a lot of years of the consistency of everybody knows that I don't work on Sunday. And I will say, if something happens and, oh my gosh, there's nobody to cover the shop, maybe I won't want to break my streak and I'll go, look, I'll just go in for a couple hours. But more than likely, I'd go, hey, put a note on the door that says, Happy Sunday with my family. See you tomorrow. Yeah. But for the most part, I look forward to being open 363 days a year. Yes.
I think the thing about it is, and again, I talk to people, but I'm regularly stopped. I generally won't say no to someone who wants advice about this career and this life. And one of the first things I lead with is, and I know this is going to sound harsh, but I think it goes to your point, which is, if you can do anything else in the world, you probably should. Right? Because those of us who are successful at this love to be there on Friday and we love to be there on Saturday. And it's not actually a problem for us to show up 363 days a year.
Right.
If it's going to be problematic for you, this is probably not the job, because the only people who succeed at the end of the day are those who really, really love it. And if you don't, if there are other things out there that you really love, you should probably pursue those, because this life is very complicated, is very hard on you personally. The majority of your day is spent with people saying, no, that's a bad idea. So that's challenging on a personal level. So you need to love it. And if you don't, you should probably find something else.
I experienced that in the store. So many people, thousands and thousands of people that I come into contact with who do so many things. And I learn so much about their lives by, they do things I don't. Right. And I learn about it. But there was a day that my daughter was in the store, and she said, Dad, it's weird. It's like everybody who comes in here wants to own a comic book store. And I said, what do you mean? Well, they all say that. I wish I did what you do. And I said, oh, no, honey, it's not that they wish they own a comic book store. It's that they wish that they were happy doing the thing that they do.
Yes.
If you listen to them, they were talking about their job. They didn't really like it all that much. They've really been, well, why do they do it then? I said, well, there's a lot of reasons why people do things. Money. Sometimes they just, they need the money. They need to pay the bills. Well, yeah, but if you do what you love, don't you make money? That's what you always say. Yes, that's true. Well, money comes to you. Oh, so I don't understand. Why do they just keep doing it? Well, they're afraid. Sometimes they're afraid to make that change. So what you're talking about is true for anything. I think any field, any endeavor. Fear can freeze you. Fear can stop you. And we lose track of the love. We lose track of love.
Right.
So it's interesting that we say things like you should consistently practice the ritual of writing. You should consistently practice the ritual of opening your store. What you should really practice is the ritual of love.
Yes.
Loving what you do, loving how you feel about what you do, which takes practice. You can't.
Well, and it takes courage. And so part of this I'll use an example just from the past few weeks. So finishing on Iron Fist, and
that's a Netflix show.
Yes, Netflix. Now that Luke Cage has dropped, keep your eyes peeled. We're next in line and excited about that. As that wrapped up, I had to entertain offers for the next thing. And there were many, many things circling around. So you're looking at things that more or less are offering similar amounts of money, lots of little things pulling in one direction or the other. And you have to make a decision about which road you're going to take. And so you do that thing that you're talking about right now, which is before saying yes to something. And they all have pros and cons that they're offering. I must discern for myself and be courageous around the things that I love, that even though culture may think that's a foolish choice, based on all the things career-wise that lie ahead of you here, you've got 3 different choices. And in my situation where there are large groups of people, there are different teams, agents, managers, lawyers, my family, there's lots of people, there's lots of voices in the room about what the right choice is. You have to sit there and be able to discern, well, which one of these things do I love the most? And the reason I say it takes courage is because the thing that you love may be completely countercultural. And from the beginning, being a kid who's walking down the street from the Abilene Public Library with a Mozart record tucked under his arm, I've been building the fact that I could pick what I loved and stick with it, even though no one around me thought that was the right thing. And I did that again. I had several offers. I went with something that a lot of people were like, really? That's your choice? But because I am that person who is and has been waiting since 1966 for this superhero era to dawn, and I can't believe it's me that's standing in the middle of it. I'm like, I'm saying yes to this because I love it so much that I can't believe it's me. Like, I'm the guy uniquely suited for this dream to come true. And even though, yes, that's an HBO offer over there, or that's a Netflix offer over there, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do the superhero thing because it's me. Like, that's the thing I love. And I don't want to step away from it yet. I'm still having too much fun. And again, I think professionally, there were a lot of people around me who shrugged their shoulders and like, I have no idea what he's talking about. Like, I just don't get it. But that's the conversation you had with your daughter, which is when push comes to shove, I pick the thing I love because I'm going to show up every day and go like, this is awesome. And not everybody does. That's okay.
Are you allowed to say what that thing is? No. Sorry, folks.
But you're right. But stay tuned. You'll know before you know it. It's right around the corner. But again, that I'm in a room, not this time, but have been in rooms in the past with people who took these jobs because they were jobs, not because they loved the material or they loved the universe you were working in. It was just something that came up and they needed a job. And they're not happy that they can do the job. They can get paid for the job. They're perfectly competent, but they're not in their cars on the way to work in the morning go, man, I cannot wait to get there. I've got such an idea for Iron Fist today that I got this thing and he's going to do this and it's going to be awesome. You come into the room and you're on fire. That's just not always the case.
Or at least your hand with the pen is on fire.
Yes, exactly right. You got your chi in order.
Okay, I'm sure that there are elements of Iron Fist. Like you look at the Stephen King thing that you adapt, 11/22/63.
Right.
And I touched on your love of Stephen King and the thing that was formative for you. And there you are doing other things that are time travel and post-apocalyptic and things that are comic book ideas,
Yes.
essentially adventure. So here you are doing Iron Fist, and thematically, Iron Fist has always had that element, like Doctor Strange, that otherworldly element.
Yes.
That element of there's another place where mystical things happen,
Yes.
and it bleeds into this world, and there's good and there's evil, and this represents one thing and this represents another.
Correct.
So a mythological idea, a very, just the hero's journey type
Yes.
of idea. Do you think that your love of comic books, rooted in the first things that you were reading, essentially the same morality tales that we see in all of the religious tomes, good, evil choices you make and how they affect you and the world? Do you think that really was formative for your writing, and do you still utilize those same ideas? You still read comics? I can attest to
Yes,
that.
indeed.
Do you still draw from that? Even today, reading comics, do you still draw the base of your pyramid? Is it still the same? Has anything changed? Have other things come in and affected you in the way that comic books have?
Yeah, I think that, it's interesting. Even at my level, you're always going in trying to convince people why you should have a job, why they should hire you over somebody else. And very much, I think the reason that I got the job on Iron Fist was because I went in and made a case for my tie to Danny Rand and his journey. And my way into that is I actually believe that there is another dimension to life that we are not generally aware of, that there is a spiritual aspect to life over and above physical existence. That's a personal belief of mine. And that's Danny's belief. Danny's actually lived there, right? So if, again, not to get too fine a point on it, but the 7 cities of heaven mean that there are 7 cities in which people live a completely different spiritual existence. And then Danny comes to our world and says to people, there's a different way to live, better than the one you have. Well, that's the traditional spiritual story. You can repurpose that in whatever tradition you're comfortable with. But that's the pitch I made in the room. I said, I believe it. I think it's true. I understand Danny's dilemma of walking around in New York City surrounded by people who don't believe it, who think that's baloney, and think he's crazy to believe that. And that's what I brought to the show. That's what I brought to the room. That's what I brought to the work. And that's my tie to comic books in general, the comic book universe, which is there is a better way to live. There are people out there demonstrating that in their regular heightened lives who are committed to everybody living a better way, a safer, kinder, more generous universe. They happen to wear capes and costumes and so forth, but they're committed to that idea. They're committed to the idea that this is all worth something, that it's worth saving, that people are called to step forward and represent something good, that there is an ecclesia, those people who are called forward to represent good, and that to varying degrees, some people like that call and struggle, don't struggle with it, and some people struggle deeply with it. And as you said a second ago, at its base, love wins. At the end of the day, love wins. And the reason that I come back again and again and again to the books that I do is through all the machinations, through all the plot, through all the intricacy, the books that I stick with and the characters that I stick with represent there's a price to be paid. It's worth paying to make sure that love wins. And, that's, I'm just that person who can't get enough of that story. I just can't get enough of that story. And that's why other books that may be darker or other stories that don't support that I can respect those things. I can respect Watchmen. But if you come to me and you say, man, I'm just getting into comics and what should I read? Watchmen's not the book I'm going to give you.
I say that all the time.
Right?
Yeah, don't start
That's
there.
not it, but I might give you Starlight.
Yes.
Right? So, or any number of other things. I might tip you off, if you're looking for a traditional thing, I might give you this latest Superman book, which is so classic and so beautifully rendered. It's such a great kind of family thing. But that's what I'm going to give you. I'm not going to give you the dark, complicated, like I said, although I respect those things, I'm not going to give you a Dark Knight book, and I'm not going to give you Watchmen. I'm going to give you something that supports my POV, and because that's what I've loved since I was a kid, and I still do. And it's very much if you look at 11/22/63 or you look at my work on Iron Fist, you're going to go like, oh, there it is. Oh, that's what he's doing. Oh, 11/22/63 at the end of the day is this massive romance that is nothing more than love is the point of everything.
Yes.
And so...
And every time travel story really is a love
when
story.
they work, that's what they're talking about. And I think the same is true of, again, all these comics that I return to again and again and again.
A lot of the time travel idea, I like asking about this. Is there any point in your life where you look back and think, I made this choice? We all think about that. If I'd have made another choice, something else would have happened. I'd have been a different person. Can you think of a time in your life where you go, maybe I could have made that other choice?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think particularly in personal relationships, certainly you get to be my age or whatever, and you don't think quite as much about maybe the typical, like, oh, I should have taken that movie, or, oh, I should have done that job and my career would be different. But I think without getting too simplistic about it, there are relational things, relationships, people that I hurt in the past where I go, oh boy, there was another choice to have been made there. And I could have avoided a lot of heartache, both for myself and other people. So going back to that moment and being more gentle, maybe approaching things in a different way where a friendship fell apart or whatever. It's like there was a better way to navigate through that. And if I had a choice, I would probably do that. Now, again, you watch 11/22 or any of these other things, you go, well, you wouldn't have the knowledge that you currently have about life. Maybe you wouldn't be as empathetic and whatever. Maybe you wouldn't be the person you are now if you hadn't made those mistakes and felt that regret. So it's tricky. That's the fun part of time travel stories.
Yeah, there's in 12-step programs, the idea is you get to a certain point and you're supposed to make an inventory of yourself. And then you're supposed to go to the people who you feel you've hurt and make amends to them.
Yes.
And one of the things that is most interesting is that some of those people are gone.
Yes.
Some of those people don't want to talk to you.
Correct.
Your regret is useless anyway, but you're supposed to do that. So what do you do? And the answer is you don't do that thing anymore.
Yes.
To others.
Correct.
And so your inventory is accomplished by changing your behavior.
Yes.
And every time you think about doing that thing, you remember, I've made a commitment to myself to not do that again.
Yes.
But then you stop yourself from obsessing over it in your mind. We all do that. I certainly do that. Mm-hmm. But this leads to something that I wasn't going to talk about. I wasn't going to mention it because probably people would tell me that it's not a good idea when it comes to an interview. But I'm going to because I think it's really important interviewing you. And that's religion.
Yeah.
I've been listening to your sermons.
Oh, boy. You really did a deep dive on your research.
Yes,
there.
I did. Yes, I did. But I found it interesting, so I kept listening.
Yes.
Now, I'm not in any organized religion,
right?
So I'm definitely not a Christian or a Catholic.
Correct.
But obviously, it's the idea that is put across. And certainly in your sermons, it is really about this is a concept.
Yes.
And some of the concepts you have are universal. And I listened to one last night that was all about basically, who are you?
Yes.
How do you define yourself? Who
Correct.
are you? It seems like a very simple question, but it goes with what we're talking about. We've talked about today, and that is you are who you choose to be.
Yes.
You make a choice. You have a choice, and that choice takes you one way or another. The idea that you're an orange, you squeeze an orange, what comes out? Orange.
Yes. Yes.
If you imagine that you're something else other than an orange, it's not going to work.
No. You're going to get squeezed and the real you's coming out sooner or later. That's the way life works.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as Maya Angelou said, if someone tells you who they are, believe them.
Yeah.
So it's a conversation we have with ourselves. So I wonder, because maybe it's something that not a lot of people know about you. I don't know if it's something that you keep to yourself as a personal thing, and I shouldn't have brought it up.
No, I'm very out. I'm very out in Hollywood as a Christian person, as a religious person. I'm certainly very out in my personal relationships with people. So none of that is out of bounds at all. I mean, you haven't
found any resistance to that in your career in Hollywood?
There's lots of resistance.
Okay.
It makes people very uncomfortable. But again, I'm not responsible for your feelings, right? As long as I'm being respectful to you and treating you with the dignity that you deserve that comes strictly from your humanity, I'm not really responsible for the way that you feel about me. And there will be lots of things that I will say that make people uncomfortable in rooms, in meetings, and so forth. But I lovingly allow them to think whatever they want, and as you said, I let God and them work that out. That's not my responsibility to work that out with them. So I think I had spoken about it recently publicly in a sermon or something, or it seems recent. It's not my job to convert anybody. I'm not interested in that. And so making sure that that's actually at the center of my life, meaning I'm not trying to convince you of anything. If people are around me long enough, they find that to be true. My evangelism, and I have air quotes around that for those of you just listening, my evangelism is my life, meaning that if you know me long enough and you like what you see, eventually you will come to me and say, what made you this way? And then I can talk to you about what made me this way, where the orange juice came from. If you like my orange juice, I can very clearly articulate why you like it. But if you don't, I'm not going to come knocking on your door and say, Judd, have you accepted Jesus into your heart? I'm not doing that. That's counterproductive. I'm against that. I don't think it works. And I don't promote it. But I also don't back away from the fact that, as I said earlier, I think there is a spiritual power over and above the physical world. I don't think you as a human being are made to operate separate from it. I think you need it in order to be healthy. And I have the path that I've traveled in order to connect to that. That can be your path. That cannot be your path. That's not my business. But if you're interested in the way orange juice is made in my life, I can talk very clearly about how that works. And I'm not frightened of it, and I certainly don't apologize for it.
And you think a spiritual practice, whatever that may be, might be helpful for people who are writing or in the entertainment industry. It's a very aggressive city.
Yes.
And there are a lot of aggressive people, not just in traffic, but in rooms, boardrooms and offices, and tensions run high. I've only ever known you to be very, very, have equilibrium.
Yes.
And And I see a lot of actors and so many different types of people, but I see them come into the comic store before an audition, and they're filled with angst, and they're sweating, and I don't know how it's going to be, and they don't know if they're going to remember their lines, and this casting director might not like them. It's easy for me on the outside to say things like, well, don't you think the casting director is really rooting for you? Like, really wants you to do well, because it reflects well on them.
Yeah.
It's not like they're an adversary.
Yeah.
So at least you can walk into a room going, we're on the same team.
Mm-hmm.
They hadn't even thought of that.
Right.
It's just such it's supposed to be a fight.
Yes.
And maybe with some kind of spiritual practice, maybe they would have a calm inside of them going, well, kind of doesn't really matter. I'm not there to fight.
Correct.
That's not why I showed up. And even if they want to fight, I'm going to say no. And have the calm, to go into a room. Often I hear actors say, God, it's so weird. I didn't even want that job. And I went in there and whatever. Mm-hmm. And then I got the job.
Yes. And
I was like, well, you were relaxed. You were just kind of at ease. It's not that you didn't care. It's just that, you weren't interested in there being a battle.
Right. Exactly right.
Maybe that's something that should be taught a little bit more alongside the artistic endeavor.
Yes.
Maybe a spiritual endeavor, whatever that may be.
Yeah. I mean, again, this is super important to making your way through this career, this creative career. Because ultimately you're not actually making a widget. You're engaged in a creative endeavor, which means that, in my opinion, you're already in the spiritual universe. You're already in the midst of something that's a little woo-woo. I mean, anybody who stands around and looks through a camera viewfinder at what an actor does is ultimately going, I don't know where that came from. That's full-blown magic. Like, how they make it happen it's just magic. It comes from, because everybody's setting lights and they're screaming and like somebody's picking at your hair and the makeup girl's poking you in the eye with that thing. And then we go action and that person is suddenly sprouting tears or doing whatever. And you're like, how does that work? I don't understand how that works. Because that's a spiritual endeavor for them. It's coming from their internal universe and made manifest in front of the camera. And some people have it and other people don't have it. So I talk to people about this all the time. You're already linked into something that's supernatural. I mean, whatever. We can hammer around that all day, but it is supernatural. It's something extraordinary over and above the natural world that happens. And so creating a spiritual practice for yourself, I think, is absolutely essential, because that you're trying to keep that peace, that special thing that only Brad Pitt can do. You're trying to guard that. You're trying to keep that safe. It's really, really a gift. It's really something special. And it needs to be handled with care. And so I talk to people about this all the time in terms of things like you mentioned, auditions or any of these kind of fraught situations. And my approach to it is that, and you've probably heard this in one of the sermons or whatever, God is not interested in your project. He's interested in who you are becoming. And
I often say that about football games. I'm like,
Yes.
why are you all, this is not about a football game. I don't think that,
Correct.
this is.
And so for the actor or the writer or the director, whoever is making their way through this gauntlet, before you go into that audition, before you go into that interview, you should really be gut checking yourself about, why am I so filled with angst? Why is this so hard for me? Meaning that, are you becoming a better person through this process or a worse person? And if it's a worse person, if you are more upset, if you're easier to irritate, if you're more angry in this process, something's wrong. It's not actually meant to be that way. That is not a life anybody actually wants. Oh, I'm going to sign up for a job that makes me more irritable and more hateful and people don't like to be around me. I don't know anybody who's pursuing that. And yet that's what you and I are experiencing around that actor, around that cameraman who's coming to work, applying for a job. They're so antagonistic. You need to come up with a practice that puts you in place going, man, this is a great day. Again, this is a strictly practice of prayer for myself, where before going to a meeting, before going to an audition, I always pray, and I did before coming here today, that Judd have the best meeting today that he's ever had. That my going to do this interview or to apply for a job, that when I go into that room, that those people have the best interview today that they've ever had, that I actually present to them something that they really, really need, that I'm the answer to their problem today. So if you're that actor and you flipped it exactly the right way, if you're that actor, your prayer life or your hope going into that room is they have a problem. They need to cast this role. I hope I'm the answer to their problem today. That when I leave, they look at each other and go, our problem has been solved. That's a completely different way to enter these rooms and enter these, what could be seen as an antagonistic situation, and completely flip it on its head and make it something that's good for you, good for them. And you come out and you go, well, whether I get the role or not doesn't matter. I hope I provided a blessing to them in that room today that makes their day better, that somehow my being there made that the best meeting of the day for them, whether I get the part or not. And once you start to do that and you practice, something does happen in that room. People go, man, I like that guy. You want to hang around with that guy some more? Yeah, I do. Let's make sure that's him. And that's how you get some success in the world that seems to come, as you were saying a minute ago. I don't know why I got that job. Well, you got that job because people kind of looked at each other and said, man, that was kind of cool. You want to hang around with that guy? And that's how it's worked for me.
But it comes from practice. And
yes.
Whatever meditation, spirituality that you have, it's something that has to, like writing, you do it every day. In some way or another, you're doing it every day, and it becomes a part of your life, not just a part of your work life.
Yes, and I think that it's important. What you've just said is so important, which is you practice it without the scoreboard on. One of the things, like you don't go, wow, I did that really well today. Right? And
you mean like that prayer was really good.
Man, I feel so awesome.
God must love that.
I slam dunked that one. I tell people all the time, it sounds weird, but if you approached it the same way you approach brushing your teeth or putting on pants, you do not finish brushing your teeth in the morning and go, that was the best toothbrushing I ever had. Tomorrow I'm going to come back and I'm going to really be awesome brushing my teeth. It becomes so habitual without a scoreboard hovering around it that it's just your natural order of things. And that is the purpose of practice, so that you go in and you don't worry about, am I doing this right? Am I in tune with the universe? That's such kind of scorekeeping and can grind people down, especially if things aren't going the way they think it ought to be going. And well, I'm not praying correctly, or I'm not meditating the right way, or my yoga practice is way off. I need to be focusing more, and that's why the results aren't happening. No, it doesn't work that way. It's that spiritual discipline is not meant to be the key that unlocks the golden, cabinet, and then that's a quid pro quo relationship, and that's terrible for people spiritually, because life just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I find that in my store, and this is what I hoped for, what I aimed for with a new store, getting rid of my others and starting fresh, starting new.
Right.
that every day I come in and it's all about doing good.
Yes.
It's only good what I offer. There's nothing bad that I offer. You have to go to the store to get food. You have to get clothing for your body. You don't have to come to the comic book store.
No.
You choose to come. And if you're choosing, that means because there's something good inside.
Yes.
So it's very simple. I keep it very simple. Is everything coming from a place of goodwill?
Yes.
And then every sale, okay, give something. Give away to a child, to charity, every day, every week, every month.
Right.
Not just 363 days a year, but even Thanksgiving and Christmas. So
Yes.
365 days a year, every single day, I'm giving away something of what I'm making.
Yes.
And I feel a desire with people who come into my store to listen to them and provide understanding in any way that I can and reflection.
Yes.
And tell whatever story I feel might be of inspiration to them, and always be a safe haven for children.
Yes.
Okay, all of those things, which I don't even think about anymore.
No.
I just do it. It's what I do. I write the check. I go and donate my time. The kids come in and I light up, and the people come in and I love people and we talk. I don't leave every day going, I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this and I check everything off. I just go home.
Yes.
Because that's what my business does. And I've thought a lot about, and certainly listening to you talk. And everyone can go and listen to these sermons if you would so choose. Thad.
Yeah, www.thads.org. O-R-G. Don't go to thads.com. That is a swingers club in San Diego. I am not involved with those guys.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
That's terrible.
Yeah, we from the front, we have been like, it's org.org, Thads, THADS.org, because people definitely like, I didn't see any of these people on Sunday. What's happening here? Yeah, so.
I'll tell you a little story of going to West Virginia. I flew to West Virginia to look at a comic book collection, and it was a pastor, an older pastor, and he was very, very serious man and very right wing and very, he wanted to show me his gun collection and told me how if Jesus were alive today that he would use guns and that sort of stuff. Okay, he had great comics, and that's what I was concerned with. And he said, I want to ask you something. He said, so you're a Jew. And
great.
I said, well, my family is Jewish. And he said, when you killed Jesus, that's how he started the sentence.
That's great. He's so many good points so far.
And I said, Pastor, I really need to stop you there because I'm relatively certain it wasn't me.
Yes. I'm pretty sure if I was 2,000 years old, we'd be having a different conversation.
Yes. And he was sort of, struck by that. And I treated him like a normal person. He treated me like a normal person. I'm really, honestly, I wasn't there for talk of religion. Sometimes it can be uncomfortable for me too.
Yes, for sure.
But people come into my store every day and they talk about things, and I am Switzerland. I am neutral. They can talk about whether they're right wing and Republican or left wing and liberal. Yeah. And they can talk about God, or they can talk about, Jehovah or whatever that is they want to say. I'm interested in listening. I learned something from everyone. So there I was, and he said these things, and he was sort of preaching to me.
Yes.
About what I should and shouldn't do.
Correct.
So I said, well, let me tell you what it is that I do. And I don't do this with Jewish faith or Christian faith or anything. I just do it. And I told him about the things that I do. And he said, well, all of that is what we preach in our church. And I said, oh, well, that's nice. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Because I said there are people come in and I listen to them and I talk to them. Children come in, I find, a safe place for them. Sometimes I give them a job or whatever it is they need. If they're hungry, I feed them. And he said, congratulations on your ministry. And I said, wow, what are you talking about, man? I told you that's not my thing. He said, are you uncomfortable with the word? And I said, I guess so. And he said, well, what does that word mean?
Yes.
Are you administering to people? Are you giving them comfort and support and healing? Are you doing that for them? And I said, I guess. I'd like to think so. And he said, "Congratulations on your ministry."
Yes.
And I wondered why it was I was so uncomfortable. Like, what was it about that word that was so uncomfortable, that it's connected to something that is alien to me? And
well, it's connected to a culture that is.
now, to be fair, he also had a wild wolf chained up behind a glass wall in his kitchen with a water tap that had holy water going into it. So,
well, that's exactly to my point, which is you're taking a word from something that has traditionally been aggressively anti-Semitic, that has been aggressively anti-gay, that has been aggressively anti-other for a long time. And they're bringing that word into your life, saying you're part of this. So you have a very hard time with language that comes from a culture that's been so anti when you are absolutely pro, right? So you're just pro everything, and that culture has been anti everything for a long time, and they're trying to take a word from their culture and give it to you. He's right. He's right about your ministry, meaning that on a strictly definition level, that is what you do day in and day out. You don't use that word to talk about it. That's fine. But that is actually what you're doing. And I would go a step further, and we can use other religious language about it, which is it's your calling. Meaning you have a career which happens to be retail, but you have a calling which is to help human beings. You can turn away from your career. You cannot turn away from your calling. And so that's all religious language to talk about something that you do without thinking about it, because it grows from who you are. It is your character. It reliably happens whether you're no different. And this is, when we talk about integrity, this is what we're talking about. Meaning you're no different inside Blastoff than you would be if I ran into you in front of the NoHo movie theater. That's integrity. And in the same way that you're not thinking about it, you're not trying to go, well, I guess I got to be a good guy now. That's just who you are. It grows out of your character because you have practiced that. So this is the way in which, when we talk about spiritual formation, it goes like this. Spiritual formation goes from my choices happen so frequently that they become my habits. My habits harden into my character. That's the way in which spiritual formation works. In the beginning, I am choosing this thing, and I have to stop and think about it every once in a while. And after a while, I stop thinking about it because now it's a habit. I don't think about it. It's just habitual in me. It's happening without thinking. And then after a while, those habits harden so significantly that it is my character and almost impossible to change. It's almost impossible to, once something has hardened into your character, to reverse it. It's not impossible, but you then have to work very, very, very hard. So if there is something inside your character that you are uncomfortable with, and I use this example all the time, we meet people whose character is they are angry. They're angry all of the time. Right? You meet them out in front of NoHo, or you meet them at Blastoff, you meet them at the supermarket, they're just angry. It's because they chose to be angry, and that choice hardened into their habit. It just became a habit. Every time something comes up that doesn't suit them, they just sit there, and they love to sit there. And even when given an opportunity to think about something different, they'll choose to think about the thing that makes them angry. And then that hardens into being, that's just their character. They're just angry all the time. And so now to go to them and say, you should stop being angry, is like going to the alcoholic and saying you should stop drinking. And because they don't know.
They don't know how.
No, they've been making those choices for so long that now they don't even see that there was a choice to begin with. That's just who they are. That's their character. And so that's the way everybody's undergoing spiritual formation all the time. And this is how it goes from choice to habit to character. And your character, which is giving and kind and compassionate, comes because at some point you said, I choose that guy. I like that version of Judd. I'm gonna practice that compassionate, caring person until I stop thinking about it, and it just happens naturally. And now that's your character. And that's, like you say, it's reflected in the store. It's reflected when we meet each other out on the street or whatever. That's just who you are. Your work is actually a reflection of your character. The store reflects it. The employees that you hire reflects it. The atmosphere in the store reflects it. It's down to the music that's playing. It's the atmosphere, the way it feels. Everything is a reflection of that character for you. And what's scary for people to hear, for the most part, is that is true wherever you find yourself. Your work ultimately is a reflection of who you are as a person. Mm. And that can be complicated, but at the end of the day, it ends up that way.
What a great lesson that is. And obviously what you've accomplished in practicing these ideas is a testament to what can be achieved. Yes. So it's refreshing to be able to talk about it without there being some kind of, strange sort of barrier between it, because there really isn't one. And maybe this going out into the world, maybe someone will listen to it.
Yes, absolutely.
And it'll affect them in some way. Thank you for being a part of this. It really is wonderful. And
that's my pleasure.
It makes a difference.
Yes, I believe it does. Just like all of this does. So you said before, at the end of the day, we stop and we go, is what I am doing producing good in the world? And this would fall into that category. So here's the blast off story. I actually was a fan of yours online. You used to write a column in a website that I used to read about what running a store was like, about your journey through there. And I looked forward to reading those columns whenever they were up. I was like, I like this guy's voice. I like these stories. I like everything that he's talking about. And then that column went away, and I had no idea where you went. I didn't really know what was happening because obviously you're on your path, I'm on mine. We're doing different things. Then I see about the opening of the store, and I'm like, that's that guy. That's the guy who is writing those columns, and he's got his own thing, and I got to go over there and see what's going on. And then because I was busy, and then I was like, oh, it's Mark Wade. Mark Wade's going to be there, and I'm a huge fan. I got to go for that thing. And then I missed it because I think I was out of town. But ultimately, I came to Blast Off because I had enjoyed those columns and the things that you said. And I remembered one specifically, which was there was a flood at the previous store, and you had people show up to help you push the water out and move things around. And I was like, yeah, see, that's what the community is meant to be like. That's a perfect demonstration of why I like comics and I like comic people. So when the Blast Off store opened, I was like, well, it's going to be that 24 hours a day. I'm all in. And that's ultimately what brought me to the store.
Oh, man, I love that. I didn't know any of that until right now.
Yes, I was saving that story for today.
And so a part of this podcast will always have a retails component.
Oh, great.
I'm going to have new retails, not columns, but stories that will happen through this microphone. So,
absolutely.
Man, thank you for that.
Yes, my pleasure.
That means so much to me.
Yeah.
If you'd like to see more of Quinton's work, you ought to watch Netflix's Iron Fist. That's coming out very soon. And if you'd like to hear his sermons, you can certainly go online and find them at fads.org.
Yes, please.
If you'd like to know more about any of our guests, you can visit our website, blastoffcomics.com, or you can stop into our retail location in the heart of the Arts District in North Hollywood, California. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We'll be back again soon with more fascinating stories from every world you can imagine. The Blast Off podcast is produced by the Colonel, Jeff Fox, Scott Tipton, and me. Original music is composed and performed by Derek Anthony Gray. You can find more of his musical compositions on his website, DerekAnthonyGray.com.
For more information about anything you've heard us talk about today, check us out online at blastoffcomics.com. We have an active Facebook presence, so check us out over there on Facebook. And you can reach us on Twitter at blastoffcomics or on Instagram.
Or you can come by our retail location in North Hollywood in the heart of the Arts District, 5118 Lankershim Boulevard in North Hollywood, just 2 blocks south of Magnolia. See you soon.